Ladies and gentlemen, when I ask you who the best chess player in the world is, you will obviously name three people. Number one, yourself. Number two, your favorite YouTuber, myself. Number three, Magnus Carlsen. And it's rare to see Magnus Carlsen in situations of defeat. It's just statistically pretty improbable. So when it does happen, and when it happens in an explosive way, your favorite YouTuber has to make a video about it. So, without further ado, it is the fourth round of the Aimchess Rapid, which is an online tournament, part of the Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. And I will be making full recaps of Aimchess, but first, we gotta look at this game. The opponent with the white pieces, Alireza Firouzja, originally from Iran, super grandmaster, now living in France, extremely talented player, and these two have a budding rivalry, so to speak, at least in the faster time controls. In the classical, Magnus still has the upper hand and begins with the Scandinavian defense. A fantastic defense, but very rarely seen at the highest level and master level because white can get a pretty comfortable advantage. It's a little bit suspicious to bring out your queen so early. Knight to c3, queen a5, this is known as the main line. Pawn to d4, which is obviously just a good move taking the center, and black plays knight f6, developing the knight. Knight to f3, and here this bishop normally waits and then pins, or it comes to f5. Also, it's very common that you will play pawn to c6 so that your queen has an escape route. Okay, and the bishop does in fact come to f5. But here, Alireza is a very good player, and this is actually why this opening is considered a little bit dubious at the highest level, because white will know the critical way to play. And the critical way to play here is to actually play the knight into the middle again, making a move with the knight again. Why? Because you actually immediately trying to punish the positioning of this bishop. Whereas if you're a lower rated player, maybe here you just play bishop here in castle, and black just equalizes without any real problems. But the opening is about putting your opponent under pressure, if you can. So knight e5, and here's the point. You know what? Black has to go here so the queen can escape. And now this move, bishop c4, attacks the f7 pawn, forcing this move e6. And here it's very well known that using the knight and the queen together, you control g4, so you play g4. And you attack the bishop and try to get it trapped. That bishop is almost completely trapped, and it would be devastating for black to try to get it away, because that knight will then take, split the pawns, and you will just take on e6 or just go with the queen, and this is just a completely lost position. So, rather than engaging in that, Magnus plays knight d7, and this position has been seen like hundreds of times. At this point, white takes, chases down the bishop. The bishop is not completely trapped, because it can go to the center like this, and you have the pin. Now here there are two options. White can play a rook move, or white can castle out of the way. It makes no real sense for white to play f3 because black wants to go here anyway, so there's no reason to weaken your position. So instead you castle. And I know what you're thinking. I've already weakened my position. My king is very weak. Yeah, but you save the f3 square for the queen. So now the bishop comes back. Of course you take this with the knight, folks, because the only advantage that is remaining for white to claim is the bishop pair. You have the two bishops and you have more space. So the two bishops, the light squared bishop will stand very strongly in the center, coming to both sides. The bishop, of course, does that. And now Magnus plays bishop d6, and there are a few ways the games begin to break now. Sometimes white expands on the queen side, sometimes we have queen f3. Alireza plays the move that scores the best. According to the database, which is available in many places, many of you asked this question, like, how do you know there have been games played? Most opening databases. I use ChessBase, but that's an expensive program that chess masters use. Many opening databases, chess.com, Lichess, they have them. There's probably others at this point that I'm not familiar with. Feel free to leave them in the comments. And Magnus here plays a fascinating move. Castle's long, which according to my Stockfish is actually a very good move and has only ever been played twice. And on the surface, it just looks like you lose this pawn. It just looks like this move cannot possibly make any sense. But the idea of blacks is to now apparently play queen here. And you cannot take this pawn. It's tactically defended with this check, which would result in a discovered attack on your queen, and you simply lose your queen. And if you just try to gobble, well, then you open up the problems to yourself. You see, this is the thing. If you push pawns in front of your king and then you castle that way, fine. If you push pawns in front of your king and then you castle that way and then you open up all of your opponent's lines to come and destroy your house, yeah, that's probably not good. So you can take one pawn, but not all of them. Alireza chooses not to bite. Anytime your opponent sets you a trap in the opening, you don't want to bite if you're unfamiliar. So bishop e3, but now Magnus is like, hey, I'm going to open up that king. So Alireza goes here. He's like, no opening. But here's the problem. Now you will never be able to stop this incoming attack, right? You can stop it for a while, but I have enough pawns. So Magnus plays Rook f8. It's very clear what he's preparing with that move, and Alireza very clearly prepares a counterattack. And this is what I said. This is a very violent game. It's a very wild game at this point. The computer thinks that after f5, black is already better. It actually starts believing black's attack more than white's attack, okay? So c4 is just exploding the position. That no pun intended, actually. At this point, the pawns can do anything. Black can take on g4. Black can push on f4, attacking the bishop. Black can actually explode the game with e5, opening up tension with 3 different pawns in the center of the board, and that is what Magnus played, and it actually is the best move according to the engine. If you slow down and take on c4, that actually plays into white's hands, because now you're giving white openings, you see? So attacks very often come down to just one move, at the highest level. If you're like 900... none of this matters. Please enjoy. It's like watching, animals at SeaWorld. Although SeaWorld is like pretty inhumane, right? At an aquarium. I don't know how inhumane aquariums are. Okay, anyway, that aside. So e5. Total explosion here in the center. Which pawn do you take? Do you take none of the pawns? Do you take on f5? Do you take on e5? So first things first, you should not take on e5 because it's all about anticipating what your opponent wants. You're going to get forked. Getting forked IRL, not always the worst thing, but getting forked, it's just not good. Don't do it, okay? So, b4. Look at this. Alireza chooses not to take anything and just to throw another pawn. I mean, this game is vintage opposite side castling attack. You just throw everybody. Everybody's getting involved, right? It's like a mosh pit. Or like one of those fights you see on Reddit. We used to have World Star. Now it's you could get any fight video like on any social media. Queen c7. And now c5. Now you would say, well, why didn't Magnus take? Sorry, why didn't Alireza take and open up the position like this? Well, because black is faster. Black is going to hit the queen first, and that's a fork. And like I said, forked IRL, not the worst thing. Forked on a chessboard, pretty bad. So c5, the bishop has to go back. Now, again, you can still take 3 different pawns. Which one are you going to take? Of course, you're going to take neither of them. Actually, Alireza at this point is ready to start trading off Magnus's incoming attackers. Magnus can here play a6, targeting the bishop and making it take. He can open up the position. He can push. He can take. Also, computer just likes very calmly sliding your king out of here because, I don't know, the computer's a scumbag and it's trying to sell us some pyramid scheme products or whatever. So e4 attacks the queen. That move is super, super normal. It's a very human move. Queen slides out of the way, and here come the pawns. All right, so 2 tempo-winning pawn moves. Hit the queen, hit the bishop. Bishop's got to slide out of there. All right, like Masvidal after the 3-piece and the soda. So bishop g5. What is that move? Why did he go bishop g5? Well, actually, his alternatives, again, computer is claiming that those 2 are the only alternatives. You either prompt the bishop, and the reason why this is just not a human move is because it creates something known as a hook. A hook is a pawn near your king when you're like about to be attacked that can just be targeted for entry. You see how this pawn is all the way back here, right? But that pawn on g4 is a hook because I can use it against you and I can open up the position using pawn trades. So Magnus plays bishop g5 because you never know if you need to go e3 or f3 in the future or whatever. And Alireza has arrived with pawn to c6. Now, very important here. If you take on c6, I'm not going to take, and I'm also not going to give you a check. I'm going to bring my rook because now you got this little triple stack here, and I'm ready. And you might think, oh, rook f6 is very simple. It's not very simple because I just take. And if we make this trade, I got rook c1 coming. So this is bad news. You're going to lose your queen. You can't stop. Your king and queen should not be on the same file like this. Hopefully ever. But when the board is open and there's a rook on the other side, yeah, let's not do that. So Magnus goes knight f6. He allows cb7. And here he has a choice. Does he take the pawn or use it as an umbrella? Hide behind the opponent's pawn. Very common idea. Tough decision. He chooses to take. He doesn't think that there's any danger. Okay, check here and bishop c6. Those 2 moves are not, they're not crazy, right? I mean, like, okay, that was kind of expected that all of that was going to happen. Now the queen has to move. The queen chooses to go to e7. At this point, how are you going to open things up here? You're a little too slow. You almost wish like these pawns didn't exist so that the rooks can just go and boom, boom, boom. So how are you going to get in? After queen e7, there's only one way to get in. Rook to c5. Rook to c5. Now, rook to c5 threatens rook b5, and the king has no shelter, which actually, if you go back a couple of moves, maybe king b8 and like this, and the queen sliding out of there wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world. The thing is, if you let this pawn live, then I would go here, and it's even worse. So there's moments for letting it live, but there's also moments where if you let it live too long, you're too slow. You're just too slow on the counterattack. So we get rook to c5 threatening rook b5. Magnus just goes all in. Magnus has gone all in, pawn to e3. I mean, that's what all of this was setting up to do. What does Alireza do? Does he take? Does he play rook to b5? Computer on low depth, like 20, gives rook b5 check as the winning continuation, but Alireza takes. Now we have pawn takes. Why does this change the position? Because now the f-file is open, which means that anytime this knight ever moves, the rook is threatening to take with check and slow down white's attack. Also, there are open diagonals potentially to get to this king in the future, and let's just not forget that this bishop is just straight up under attack. So in this position, you probably have to move the bishop. Where do you move it? Do you move it to c1, to c3, or e1? Where would you move it? I was going to take a sip. Turns out I didn't fill up my water before I started recording. Now I'm very upset. You got to go here. You got to reroute to g3. You have another piece coming to the party. I mean, bishop g3 is monstrous move. So now black has two ways to prevent this from doing damage. Number one, physically prevent it with the knight. I mean, at least defend that square. Number two, and this is why engines are scumbags, rook d6. Which doesn't allow this move to come with check, but you voluntarily pin your rook to the king because then you have e2. And both sides are fast enough to attack each other's rooks. You say, Levy, it doesn't matter, just go here. Yeah, but that's called clearance. That pawn clears out for the queen, and now black has arrived first. And you would think that white is completely safe, like there's nothing to worry about. Check. And if the king goes back, the bishop comes. If the king goes here, there's knight g4. You get to this king before I can get to your king and mate you. You're a move ahead of me. So rook d6. Magnus plays knight e4 to prevent this, and that kind of prevents bishop g3 because, well, he would have gone king c8. He would have walked directly into the line of attack of this rook, and there's nothing the bishop can do. The bishop has all these moves that it can go to, and none of them threaten the king. For example, bishop takes d5, the rook is hanging. That's what's lost in all this, is that you're covering g3, but you also target the rook, so no bishop check scares you, right? So knight e4, Alireza plays queen h2 check, which is a slightly different way of attacking that king. And Magnus says, it doesn't matter. I still have king c8, okay? The rook is targeted, but here's the problem. In this position, it's not about the rook anymore. It's about the fact that the queen supports c7. You can pause here and try to find it, but here we get bishop d7, double check. You are forced to take with the king. So you do it, and you say, well, why? Well, because this, you're getting mated. You disconnect the queen. So takes, and now who comes in? Gotta be the rook. Now, here there's a choice. If king to e8, then there's rook takes e7, and then, you know, the queen comes in. And Magnus, either for reasons of practical resignation, because he could have just resigned the game, or maybe there was time trouble. I'm inclined to believe this was a gentleman resignation. Plays king to e6. And king to e6 is essentially a move where you look into the fire and you know that it's coming from both sides. So you decide to step out and just fall into it. And queen to e5 cuts off the king from both sides and mates it straight down the middle. Queen on e5 is checkmate. All the squares behind the king are occupied. And Alireza Firouzja won a very nice game on the first day of the Aimchess Rapid. And I figured I would share it because this was the only game that Magnus has lost. And also the only game that he's lost thus far. It's been 8 rounds as we speak. So a big win for Alireza. I think it was also his only win of the day. And a very, very exciting game from start to finish with pawns being thrown. Like, look at this. I mean, look at that. That's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful, violent game. And a big win for Alireza. Hope you enjoyed, folks. I don't make a lot of these one-off kind of videos, but I figured I would share this one with all of you on this Sunday or whenever you're watching this. And Aimchess recaps are coming. Peace out. Get out of here.